You're listening to We're All Gonna Die Anyway with Jess Weiner. Don't worry. This is a joyful podcast about life, death, and everything in between. This is indeed a very special episode with a very special guest. In fact, this guest has been on the program once before. The guest today is my husband, Felipe Lopez. And Felipe and I, we did an interview and a podcast around life, death, and everything in between right at the beginning when we were starting to tape here in this beautiful studio that, as you know, he helped to build and create. And it was a wonderful conversation that I hope you listened to before listening to this one, because I think it will set up the story of who my husband is and how he is engaged in living a good life and why it's so important for him as an individual to live a life that he loves on his own terms, but how we together as a couple have really kind of created a life where we're on this journey trying to figure out how we want to spend our time while we're here and how we want to live on purpose. So we explore all of that in our first conversation. And I didn't know or expect that we would be having a second conversation about this, but we have experienced some great loss during this pandemic. My husband has lost his mother, Rosario, and his brother, José, to COVID-19. His mom was only 72 years old. His brother was 40 years old. They died about 5 days apart from each other. They died very quickly from this virus. And that sudden tragedy and trauma kind of sparked us to be having more of these conversations, obviously, because we were living such a surreal experience. And so it didn't dawn on us at first at all, obviously, that we would want to have a conversation about this publicly. But I think as we started to feel into our grief and the shock wears off for a minute, it's not lost on me that, these are the conversations I wanted to have publicly, and here they are happening to us in real time. And so I asked him if he wanted to have a conversation about what it was like very soon after. We're just at about a month out. So it's very soon in his process. And so he said yes. And my one caveat was I just wanted to protect him and let him know that he didn't have to have everything figured out and he didn't have to share what he didn't want to share. And so this conversation you're about to hear is deeply, deeply unscripted. We woke up this morning, we talked about this interview, we gave ourselves some parameters and some permissions. And then like we do as partners, we trusted each other. And we're going to move our way through this conversation together, and we did. And I think you'll learn a lot about me. You'll definitely learn a lot about my husband and how absolutely fantastic a human being he is, and how even in the depths of the darkness that we've been feeling, there is so much light and there is so much love. And so I felt like it was my honor to be able to have this conversation with him now, to capture this. And most of all, before we began recording, we said we wanted to be of service to the people who are watching and who are listening, so that we may be able to pay something forward for somebody else who may be feeling what we're feeling here now. So this is my gift to you. He's a gift I get to enjoy every single day of my life, God willing, for as long as I'm in this body. Please meet my husband, Felipe Lopez. Let's dig in. Hi, my sweetheart.
Hi, darling.
It's kind of surreal to be back here again. It's great because you helped make this studio.
It feels good to be here.
Yeah. It feels good to be back together. What we're talking about is a little bit difficult today. And I think you and I talked a long time about our choice to make a podcast episode about some big losses in your life and in our lives. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking before we started taping, I said to you, let's think about who we might be able to help in sharing this story today, because that really was the purpose of creating this program, was to open up the conversations around death and life and love and living an urgent life and living la buena vida, the good life.
Yes.
And we're in a rough season right now. I mean, I think the whole world is in a rough season because of pandemic and because of, obviously with the impact of COVID. I think when I think about seasons, I think about them having an ending So that feels good that at
Yes.
some point there will be a relief. But we're in a rough season, and we've had some big loss. And that loss is that we lost your mom and your brother to COVID-19
Yes.
not that long ago. This is just about a month.
Today is a month that my brother passing.
Yeah, and your mom died 5 days before
5
him.
days before him.
So I want to unpack that a little bit, because I think one of the things you and I talked about was it's still very fresh. So like, honestly, this is not a show about having answers, but this is a show about using the platform, I think, to talk about what the process has felt like. Because when we first started hearing about coronavirus, I think you and I were both like watching it, like a lot of people were, like from the sidelines. Like,
Yes.
It was terrible. It sounded like it happened out there somewhere. I don't think we ever thought, when we were sitting here last time in February, that by August we would be having this conversation.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that you look at them like, when I was growing up in Mexico, you hear about the war in El Salvador, right? You see the news, you see people is dying, there's a war happening in another country.
Right.
And you live in a country where peace is being prevalent for a long, long time. And you never imagine it's going to happen to you.
That's right.
So we were in that state.
I think that's the right analogy,
Yeah.
because I think we're going to get into in a little while, not right now, but we're going to get into how people are reacting and disassociating from the reality of COVID. But I want to talk about these losses, because I think for us too, as a couple, there's a lot we could probably glean and talk about for the people listening and watching right now about things that we're learning about how to support each other during this time, but and also like what people can do. I think sometimes when people know that you've lost somebody and two people so tragically, they kind of feel they're not quite sure what to say. So I want to get into all of that stuff, but I just want to check in first with you and say, like, can you share a little bit about what the process has felt like for you, the process of finding out, and maybe I'll set the story. Do you want me to do that?
Yes, of course.
I probably should do that before I jump into that question. So your mom was 72 years old.
Yes.
Your brother was 40 years old. And both of them got very sick very quickly. Your brother most likely passed this to your mom. And both your brother and your mom didn't take the greatest precautions
Yes.
about wearing a mask and
Right.
isolating.
It was a series of decisions that were negligent in both parts. When we were talking prior to this talk to today, I was thinking that for a while I was in this anger of blame. I was blaming my brother for giving this virus to my mom. I was angry because I couldn't tell him that I was so angry at him.
Yeah.
But then, you go through these different stages, and a lot of this happened not because of his fault. It was because of misinformation.
Yeah.
And the way he was getting his information, like the way he was processing what was happening in the world, and the way he was believing in what he was watching on his phone, mainly.
Yeah, let's set the stage a little bit. So your mom's name is Rosario, your
Yes.
brother's name is José. So I want to use their names as much as possible in this podcast, because I also think that right now when we hear the numbers, the death tolls, the amount of people that are impacted, we don't often attribute names to them. There's just too many, quite frankly. There's
Yes.
over 150,000 people died already in the United States, worldwide, many, many, many more. But José, your brother, he's 2 years younger than you, almost 2 years younger.
A
A year
year.
and a half, right? No.
About a year to the
He
time.
is?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And José grew up with, or about 9, José was diagnosed with epilepsy.
Yes.
And you say like it changed his life kind of dramatically, right? Because of the way your parents began to overprotect him as a result of trying to help manage his seizures, like maybe not quite understanding epilepsy or kind of wanting to protect him from the pain of those seizures.
Yes. Despite that, I grew up with a mom that she was a nurse. She was in healthcare in some capacity. When Jose contracted epilepsy, or the epilepsy manifested in Jose,
Yeah.
which to my knowledge, that's what happened. It can happen to anybody
Yes.
at any age. I was the first one to see Jose with the seizure. I
You were? Oh,
basically
that's
woke
right.
up. I basically woke up next to him because we used to share the bed.
Uh-huh.
And the night before, we were fighting of who will sleep on the edge of the bed, because the bed was towards the wall.
Okay.
And I didn't like to sleep against the wall, so we were fighting. My dad was like, "Okay, just let Jose do that." I was like, "Okay." I wake up and I feel the bed moving, and Jose's head was on the
Oh, my
floor,
God.
and his feet were on the bed. So it was so traumatic because I didn't know what was happening. He was blue.
Yeah, and it's the
and
first time that you're seeing
it
this.
was the first time I saw a seizure, like up close.
And if he's a year younger, then he's 9 and you're 10 at that point.
Yeah. So
Wow.
Jose was the most active of both of us.
Yeah.
He was the most adventurous. He was the craziest one, and we were always together. So that completely changed our lives.
Yeah. How did it change your life? Like, how did your family react after that?
Well, from that point on, my family overprotected Jose. Jose was
Yeah.
not able to ride a bike anymore, go out by himself anymore, live his life as a normal person anymore.
And as he grew up and as became a young man and then an adult man, he had created for him by your family, but also by himself, like a somewhat of a limiting life, right?
Yes.
He didn't have a lot of external, like extracurricular activities. He didn't really go out of the house very much. Like he was kind of like not homebound because he had to be, but I think partially that was kind of right a residual of how he was raised. Would you say that's right?
Yes. And also to add to that,
Yeah.
we growing up in a patriarchy, very, very strong. Whatever his feelings were never valid. It was
Yeah.
more about he needed to do what dad will say that he has to, and no discussion about it. He
Yeah.
was always tied to my dad's orders,
Yeah.
in many, many ways.
And your dad your dad passed away a month after we got married, so he's been gone about 7 years.
7 years.
So Jose, I mean, the reason why I'm setting this stage a little bit is for people who are listening to understand the fullness of his life. Number one, that yes, he was this vibrant young kid. You were very close to him. This, epilepsy changed his life in the way that he saw how he could live his life. It was very limiting. He had a lot of limitations. And I think as he grew up, my experience of him and knowing him through you is that, he spent a lot of time inside. He spent a lot of time online. He got a lot
Yes.
of interaction online, on Facebook. That's where he would talk to friends. That's where he would read news.
And this was very recent. His access to a cell phone was very recent. This was his first higher tech cell phone that he owned on his own. Before, he didn't even own one.
Right,
I'm
'cause
telling you, probably 3 years ago,
Okay.
he didn't even own a cell phone. So from 3 years ago
Yeah.
to now, he discovered himself navigating Facebook, navigating the social media in general.
Otherwise, his life was fairly regimented and, offline. He lived at home with your mom in Mexico, super common to do. Your mom ran a little tienda out of the house, and Jose had some side businesses, and, he had interests. He had lots of interests. He was a wonderful needlepoint, and right? Is that what you would call
Well,
it?
Jose had a lot of abilities.
Yeah.
He was curious. He was super smart. He could be a mathematician, and
Yeah.
he loved science. He loved chess. Playing chess was kind of like his pastime, and he was very good at it. I'll never beat him in chess, and he will resolve equations that I will only dream of resolving in a
Really?
long time. So he loved numbers.
And he did
and,
art
and
as
he
well.
started
He painted
started
and,
learning needlepoint,
yeah.
and he always wanted to create something with his
Yeah.
hands. He had that. He inherited that
He
from all of
painted,
us.
he
Yes.
drew, he needle pointed our wedding napkins
Yes.
with our,
Yes.
like he embroidered our
Yeah,
names.
embroidered, yes.
Embroidered, that was the right word. So he's this creative, really bright, really sweet, sensitive person who grew up, I would say, and this is, tell me if this feels right, but just grew up in a community and in a family and in a system in Mexico where you live, where a lot about his condition wasn't fully understood. As you said, like the machiste kind of not acknowledging some of the complex feelings that he was having. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for him to go beyond the label of, well, Jose has special needs. He's got epilepsy. We can't trust him to be out in the world. Because there were some big scares when he would go out on his own, and he's had some pretty big seizures. And there were reasons, I think, why your family was scared, right? But they over-rotated?
Yeah, well, because he was not like because of his true nature of being curious and wanted to go out, and he loved machining. My dad was, as you know, he was a machinist, so he loved the machines. He loved the workings of it, and he was a brilliant lathe operator, which is a giant machine, and but because of his condition and because it was the reason Jose was suffering through that is because my family never did the research to take care of him and control his epilepsy. So it was mostly 1 year, like only one time a year they will go to the doctor. The doctor will say, "Here, give him these pills, and it's going to be okay." And every time, he needed more follow up.
Yeah.
Because it's delicate medication, and you need to tweak it as the time goes by until you hit the right dose and the right amount. But my family didn't know that. They were just in a different state.
Right.
So Jose will get into an accident, or he will go out by himself to go and buy a piece of fruit, and then he will come back with bruises or blood on his
Because
face.
he's had a seizure.
Or somebody will come running and say, "Hey, Jose is this," because he was also loved in the neighborhood. He was a very good guy.
Yeah. I think the reason why we're spending time talking about it, and you're right, epilepsy is certainly manageable and controllable, and lots of people live with it. But the reason why I wanted to share, and it wasn't the only thing about Jose, but the reason why I wanted to share it was because I think when we start to talk about where Jose was susceptible to news and information around COVID that is false, it was because also he was getting a lot of his emotional connection and relationships and news and information from online. And unfortunately, quite under the influence of media outlets and false stories and all of this misinformation about COVID is a government conspiracy, it's a hoax, don't wear your mask. Like, he had kind of been absorbing when we heard about this in February or March, and we were talking to him, he didn't believe this was a real thing.
Yes, he told me not only one time, a couple of times. He said to me, "I don't believe in this. This is a government hoax. This is," and I mean, this is my translation to this.
Right.
But in Spanish, it just sounds ridiculous to me. It was like, "Jose, why don't you understand that this is killing people?" I asked him. And he said, "No, you're never gonna convince me. I know this." And then he proceeds to send me these videos,
I remember.
via WhatsApp, of doctors or quote unquote doctors that they were telling you, "No, this is just in your head," and so and so. You know, all of this different information supported by science.
And I think we're seeing, look, Jose is not alone in thinking that. We're looking at it in a lot of people in the world who are not protecting themselves or others right now. We're looking at a lot of people who pass on these conspiracy theories as truths, and it can be really confusing. And look, the reason why I think you and I decided we wanted to share this, right, was because if this helps open up a conversation in somebody else's family, if this helps somebody, you know, have a different kind of conversation. Although you tried, it's not for lack of trying. You tried to talk to him. You tried to tell him how concerned you were. The harsh reality is that he's a 40-year-old man, and he did what he did, which was he didn't take protection. And he got sick, and he got sick very quickly.
Yes. As far as we know, Jose starts getting sick. My mom starts noticing that he is not coming out of his bedroom and he's coughing. And she says to my brother David, the youngest, who is basically in charge of the household, she says, "Hey, I've seen your brother. I don't think he's feeling so good."
Yeah. Because they weren't following protocols, and because they weren't quarantining, they weren't knowing what the signs were. I mean, they knew enough that he was ill. And again, I don't want to, this is not about finding a blame or a shame. This is about just kind of walking through the fact that it happened so quickly, that we take so much for granted about being able to convince our loved ones to change their minds, that we've got all the time in the world to have these conversations. And he got sick. Your brother ended up taking him to the hospital in Mexico, and then your mom started showing symptoms. Your mom, Rosario, who you said was a nurse, worked in healthcare. We love your mom. I want to talk about your mom in a second. Your mom was a stubborn, sweet, amazing woman, but man, she was stubborn, and she believed what she believed, and she also kind of believed in what Jose, right?
Yes.
That this wasn't as big of a deal.
I think that my mom falls in this, and I mean, I can say this freely because it's my mom. I think she falls in this stereotypical Mexican mom that loves her children to death, and she couldn't bear the idea, because during this process, my youngest brother put Jose in his bedroom, and he was taking all these precautions. I isolated the house, cleaned everything, and he told to my mom, "You cannot go in to see him. I'm the one that's going to be in charge of going and giving food and see him." My mom didn't listen. She took advantage that my brother went out to get food, and she went in his bedroom to change the sheets of the bed and move him around. And his only her excuse was that she had to see her son, and that she didn't believe either in this thing.
And we believe that's where she contracted this piece. And so again, why this is important is because I'm sure that there are so many people listening and so many people watching who watch their families do that same thing, who just push the limit, do the things that, we're kind of guarding against. And all of this is in hindsight, right? Your mom is incredible. Your brother is incredible. Yeah. They most definitely, I think, were living in a space where they believed the rhetoric that this was not a real virus. And unfortunately, they died very quickly, and they died within 5 days of each other, which we talked about just over a month ago. And that is the kind of news, I think, when they were in the hospital and we were kind of, dreading every time the phone rang. It's extra hard right now because we couldn't go there to be with them. So it's, not like, when you have a family member who falls ill and you have the benefit of being able to go travel to be near the rest of your family even.
Right.
We couldn't do that. We couldn't travel. We couldn't be there. And when we got the call that we got the call first, obviously, that your mom died first. And I guess, for me, I was with you when that moment happened, and I know that it's so deeply devastating. Do you have a sense of that still? Do you remember that moment clearly? Or
it was a very numbing moment.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden I get the voice of my brother saying that my mom is gone. Because he literally said, "My mom is gone." And I was like, okay, I didn't know what to do. A million things could go in my mind. I need to cry, I need to scream, I need to just bite the pillow because I was in bed, or something. But none of that happened. It was just me just sitting, and you remember, next to you, just acknowledging and trying to make sense of it.
Well, and your mom, if there is a blessing out of all of this, and believe me, this story gets twistier in a second because I want to talk about some real God and spiritual moments that happened in this that were unexpected. But your mom passed in her sleep, thankfully. She wasn't even in the hospital for one day. Yeah. She was sick enough to get admitted to the hospital. We knew that she had COVID. We believe she had a heart attack in her sleep, which is also a byproduct of having COVID. So I want to say all of these things because I think I don't want to open up and so rehash so much for you. I want to protect you. I love you, and it's our business, and I know I want to be careful about what we share, but why we're sharing it is because I want people to try to put themselves in your shoes. I want them to try to think about, their mothers and their brothers and the people that they love, because I think if there was a blessing, it was that your mom didn't suffer. José was in the hospital for over a week. He was on a ventilator. He was fighting really hard. And unfortunately, he succumbed to it just in about a week's time of being there. But where it gets really mystical in this process, right, was your younger brother, David, calls and tells us that there's a nurse involved in this, right? The nurse that's watching over your brother first and then your mother when she came in. And this nurse happens to be
my cousin.
Your cousin, which you haven't seen.
I didn't know she was working there. I mean, none of us knew. Turns out I haven't seen her since she was 15 years old. Now she's a 35-year-old woman, professional, and she's the head nurse of the ICU unit in this hospital. And it was such a blessing.
But here's the thing. Your cousin's name is Myra.
Yes.
Your cousin's name is the name of our friend who died in 2018, who I've talked about on this show, who was the inspiration for doing this show, who we became friends with the last 7-8 weeks of her life. She's a special angel in our life. And then all of a sudden here is, out of a lot of darkness, because we were in a dark place when this was happening, there's the news that it's a family member. And her name is Myra, which is not a very common name in Mexico, I don't think.
Well, it is common, but I mean, what are the odds?
Right.
That I was going to re-encounter one of my cousins
at such a crazy time.
She was the only lifeline in between my mom and my brother and us.
Right.
She would give us texts, she would give us calls to let us know.
Yeah.
And she will talk to the doctors firsthand, and she will give us exactly what the state of affairs were.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
There's so many crazy parts of this story about being in this hospital and just healthcare in general in Mexico as we experienced it, because we were on the hunt for our own medical devices sometimes. Yes. The healthcare system, and we probably go into this in another podcast, but it's different in a lot of ways in the U.S. and in a lot of ways it's not different. I mean, they're under-resourced, they're underfunded, and, in the healthcare system, you get what you pay for. And so we were fortunate that we were able to kind of help get some of the things that we needed for José, but unfortunately it wasn't enough. But one of the things that your cousin did that I am so grateful for is not only did she keep in great communication, but she had us all, because you had started these WhatsApp chains for, this side of your family.
As soon as the pandemic hit, and at the end of March, we were like already scared. And I decided, it occurred to me, I need to contact my family. I need to really keep them closer. So I decided to create a WhatsApp group. And then I start with the cousins. And then I was like, give me your dad's number. And then I'm going to start adding them.
Yeah.
Right now, we're like over 30 people in this group that we're all connected.
Yeah.
So one of the most beautiful things that Myra helped us do with this group is that I asked everybody to record a voice message.
Right.
And she will bring the phone to José, and then she will play all the voice messages from everybody. Actually, it makes me emotional because it was something really beautiful.
Yeah. We still have those.
I saved them, and all the amazing, beautiful words and the demonstrations of love towards José. I mean, my family is very limited in feelings. Like, to express your feelings in my family is really hard.
Yeah.
But the fact that I hear my uncles saying to Jose, "Hey, Jose, I love you. I want you. I want to play soccer with you. Whenever you recover." It was something like it really broke me. It really, but it also made me feel happy
Yeah.
because I know that there is love in my family, and and it makes me sad because it only takes these times to for them to demonstrate it.
That's right. That's what we were talking about, was that this is how we want to live more without the trauma or the drama, right? We don't want to be only responding in death around these moments. But you're right. You talked about this in the last conversation we had, was about growing up in a very macho culture where feelings were not expressed freely, where there wasn't a lot of emotional vocabulary
Yes.
for the things that you were feeling. And you created this beautiful WhatsApp chain that, you're right, was in place well before this happened. So when Jose was in the hospital, this was the way we could organize communicating to him. And thank God we had Myra. As you know, I just think about all the people who had nurses they didn't know, right?
Yes.
Who couldn't talk to their healthcare providers. So like we were very lucky in that way, and obviously deeply unlucky in that Jose could not fight off this virus.
Yes.
And he never knew that your mom died. I mean, he was pretty much in a self-induced coma from the moment they put you on that ventilator. And so he died just a month ago today, right?
Exactly a month ago. Yeah.
Which I didn't realize that when we sat down to do this, that this was that. But
it's everything. I mean, all of the things that we connect, you and I think that's the special part of this. Our conversation this morning about talking of this podcast is about honoring this
That's
idea,
right.
honoring the creation of this conversation about death, having it present, having it. You as a creator, and of course I admire you deeply because of the way you do things and the way you take me through these talks. Talking about death is not tragic. It's not only sad. There's a lot of happiness hidden in the way you talk about death. I mean, I feel horrible because I lost two family members at once. But there is a lot of blessings that they pass on me, and that I'm never going to forget. And this experience with Myra and my cousin, now I get to talk to her more often. Now I get I got to create this group where my family is tighter.
Yeah.
And they show me, and I get to be motivated. Every week I put myself as because I created the group,
you kind of
I
set the
take the
tone.
responsibility of, hey guys, I'm here. This is Monday. I just want to let you know that I love what you share. Keep sharing. Don't send memes or stuff that is just pick up from the
Let's
internet.
just be honest. The Lopez side of your family is very disorganized.
Oh, yes.
So you're like the leader of the Lopezes right now. You're like on WhatsApp anyway. You're like trying to get them wrangled a bit. It's like a little bit like wrangling cats.
Yes.
But you also did something I think really amazing that I was very proud of you of personally. And this kind of goes back to the question I had started asking you, which was kind of like, how are you feeling? And, which I want to get to, but I was so proud of you because I think there's this moment when you have trauma and when you have this kind of shock, which is what we had. It was deeply shocking news and a horrible traumatic experience, and everybody kind of comes together, like you said. And then there is a natural time in grief where it just lessens, right? People start to, they get sad, they face the shock, and then they start to go back into their habits a little bit. And so this WhatsApp group, like you were saying, they started to share like a little bit more memes and jokes and like food that they were eating. And I was so proud of you because I know you as my husband and my partner and as a man who's been doing the work to build your emotional vocabulary and your emotional literacy and like to be able to be really empowered. And you wanted to tell your family that even though they were seemingly going back to normal, that life wasn't feeling like going back to normal for you.
I think the main topic of that was that I decided to post a video. I was feeling super sad. That was a very horrible week for me. And I said, okay, I'm really going to say something that I never said before. And then I went ahead and said, today is about mental health. My mental health is very important. And this is part of it. Telling you that I feel sad, that I feel terrible, that I don't know how to overcome it. But this is something that is happening to me. I just want you to see me.
Yeah.
And I never imagined I could have done that before.
Honey, I don't think you could have done that before. You've been working really hard on this. This is what therapeutic work, self-work, introspective work looks like, my love. Like, you have been doing the work. And I think, I know that, like, some of your family members, they all responded lovingly in their own ways, but not everybody could understand where you were coming from, because you're challenging a system. You're challenging a system of a way of being. I mean, we've been talking about this as a couple, since we've been together. We're each breaking systems and places of how we were, born and raised, and you talking about your feelings, you owning your feelings. I was so proud of you, because the hardest part with mental health is we try to hide it when we feel that sad and depressed. And I was so happy actually that you shared that with them.
I think that's an evolution. It's part of my evolution. I own it, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
And of course, some of my family members, it's also nice to see that they haven't changed, because I know that it's just like that's the way they are. Some of them will say, "Oh, don't worry, just drink a couple of whiskeys and be fine, and you'll be fine." Other ones will say, "Oh, just stay with God. God is gonna fix everything for you." And then there were others that they will say, "You know what? I'm with you. I've been in therapy for this number of years, and I understand what's happening to you." So it's like you going into a painting a wall, and you pick the yellow color, and everybody else is streaking with purple and blue and black, and then somebody else comes with another yellow brush and then joins you in your painting,
Yeah. And even in a family, that can be really hard, because so many people, I think, listening often will feel like they're the only yellow color in their family, right?
Yeah.
Which is what you felt in your life. And I want to talk about the grieving process. That's kind of where I was starting with that question about, like, how are you feeling? Because I think one of the things you and I have said to each other from the beginning is, I mean, thank goodness. Here's the other crazy thing. Like, thank goodness we are quarantining at home together. And that because we've been able to really be at home. We've not been able to be distracted by travel or work or other things. Like, when this happened, we were home, we were together. As your partner, I was doing my best to hold the space for you. But I want to talk about the phases of grief and kind of how it hits, to kind of put some color on that a little bit. Because it's been like a really wild ride this month.
Yes. If I can put it in words, is this waves. And I remember you and I, we read this passage from the Pema.
Yeah, we did.
It talks about life comes in waves, and they keep coming. They just keep coming,
right.
And they're gonna keep taking you down, and again. It's just about how you learn to stay up, and just to know that. Be conscious that those waves are going to keep coming. It's how you face them the next time.
Yeah.
How you go through them or towards them the next time. And that has been happening to me this month. Yeah.
It's like there was shock in the beginning. And these are all the normal stages of grief that, people write about. But there was this, this shock. And then you're kind of dealing with all the details. And by the way, like, we're not able to have a funeral for your mother and your brother. They cremated the bodies within 12 hours of them dying because they had COVID. So there was just like this rush of like, they're here, they're sick, they're gone. And I think that harshness and that shock was like the beginning part for us, where we were kind of like finding our legs. And then, a couple weeks in, and you went through a real deep depression and sadness, which are also normal stages of grieving. Yeah. And then I think I had that when you started to come out of it. Then I felt like I could give in to the sadness that I was feeling, mostly for you, because I love you so much, and it was so hard for me to see you in so much pain, and also because I love my suegra and my cuñado,
and she loved you, and I mean, Rosario and José loved you so much.
And I love them. And I think feeling that loss together, and also not being able to be with our families, like all of it just fucking sucks. Like all of it just sucked. But I wanted to name the stages and the waves that we talk about, because I want to help normalize that for people to know it's not a straight line. You're not like just sad all the time. I mean, we also got beautiful, beautiful cards, flowers, texts, books, lots of love outpoured from the people in our life.
Yes.
Were you able to receive that?
I think that the first 2 weeks and all these demonstrations of love were so much, and at some point overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because you get a note and it's very meaningful, and I understand that the people has sent us these different notes and different gifts. Some of them food, which was delicious, by the way. But it's a constant reminder of my loss. It's a constant reminder of how sorry people feel for me. And then you get dark. You get in this darkness of, I mean, what is going to happen to me? What if I die now? Nothing is going to have a meaning. So and I was given into that. My brain starts going into these deeps of like really, really dark places.
Yeah.
Then when the demonstrations of love stop coming.
Yeah.
The silence hits. And then you're with yourself, and your brain and your heart is hurting, and you have that knot right here that you cannot let out.
Yeah.
And you're looking for that space. But in all this, I had you. Mm. And that's amazing. Having you near it's just great, because I can tell you, and I can cry, and I can scream, and I can just be me.
Yeah.
My full self.
Yeah.
Like no reservations. I can just be who I am.
Yeah. You're right.
And that is very, very important.
Thank you, baby.
To have a partner is something incredible. And I never imagined it.
Yeah. Well, this is the tough stuff of being in a relationship, right? These are the moments that you dread, but you plan for, because you know that if you're going to go through life with somebody, you're going to experience these moments. And I don't think, we never think about, you and I try very hard to be gentle with ourselves and not put a lot of pressure to do anything perfectly, because that is a real mind fuck. But for something like grief, you have no idea. We have no idea how we're going to feel. But but one thing I have to say that made me feel very proud of us during this time was we did use resources and tools that we had been cultivating in our lives well before this. So for me, medication, I stayed constant on my medication, and therapy, we doubled up and tripled up on therapy. So we sought those resources. We read. And we listened to our bodies. We slept when our bodies needed to sleep. We ate when they wanted to eat. We rested quite a bit. We went introverted for a while. And I remember, one of the things I wanted to say about all the outpouring of the love, which was really incredible. Like sometimes you forget like who's in your world who lost their parents. And that brings up things for them, right? And they're able to identify you. And you entered into a really exclusive club of people who've lost both parents. And remember
Oliver's.
Our 9-year-old nephew gave you a card. So this is the beauty of the story. This is Myra's son.
Yes.
Who we've become aunt and uncle to, Auntie and Tio. And we saw the kids. They're like the only couple members of people we've been able to see during this quarantine have been these family members. So Ollie comes over and he gives you a card to say his condolences, because he's also lost his mom.
Yeah.
And what does he say in the card?
In the card, I don't remember exactly all the words, but he said, "I'm so sorry you lost your mom," and then he ends like, "And you're an orphan now."
Right. It was just like this,
Period.
crazy.
I was like, okay.
It's just out of the mouths of babes, right? He was just super blunt. He's like, I could relate to, losing your mom. I feel really sad. I lost my mom too, but I didn't lose my dad. I'm not an orphan like you, or something like that. And
something like that. He called me an orphan.
Well, we just looked at that card.
But that was like, this is my Oliver. He's transparent.
Yeah. Well, it brings it into a fine point for sure.
Yes.
But you're in a, kids just say what they say, and that's why we love them. But you go into this space where there's a lot of loss and you're navigating through it. And I remember one of the things actually Oliver's dad, Henry, Myra's husband, said to us was, do not worry about returning those text messages. Do not worry about calling people back. Do not worry about sending thank you notes. This is your time to receive, not to give. And I thought that was really helpful, because I think you can also get overwhelmed with all the outreach that we feel like we have to give it back.
Right.
And I think that's good for people to remember when they're sending their condolences, that it's not always necessarily that it needs to be returned, that it can just land. Because when you're receiving all of that, it's different days, you feel different things.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we talked about a little bit in the last conversation, but I think is important maybe as you and I are navigating around what it's like to build our lives and our good life together, is this idea of reparenting. We talk about that a lot because you and I have some specific things in our childhoods that we do not want to continue as adults.
Yes.
We don't have biological children, although feels like we run a zoo at our house right now, because also during this time, by the way, a week before your mom passed, we adopted 2 new kitties.
Yes.
We've had a real season of loss this year. I mean, we actually loss and gain. In our family, we got a new dog at the beginning of quarantine named Una, who's a senior dog who we found out is deaf and has one eye.
Yeah.
Well, we knew she had one eye, but we found out she was deaf.
Yes.
Then we had 2 kitty cats, and our beloved kitty cat, Cece, got very sick very quickly with cancer and died at the end of May. I, from like my grief perspective, being her kitty mom, was not expecting to want another animal again, but I almost immediately wanted to get new kitties.
Yeah.
Or one kitty. I wanted one kitty.
You were browsing constantly for
I was
cats.
a little bit like on Cat Tinder.
If you could have 20, you would probably get 20 cats.
But excuse me, sir, we went to go look at cats, and there were sister cats, and you said what?
We were gonna go and look for the black one.
We were gonna go look for the black cat.
And then as soon as they put you in this room, and then as soon as you enter to meet them, she was with her sister, little tabby, gray tabby cat. She was just sitting there on a chair, and then they both start playing, and I just sit down and I say, "Why don't we get both?"
Exactly. Okay, so that's not my fault. That is your fault. We got both kitties. So we get a dog, we lose a cat. We get 2 kittens like a week before. We lose your mother, we lose your brother. You know, it's like it's been a real ride of both loss and gain. And so what I was trying to get at with the reparenting is that like families are both chosen and they're blood related, right? And they're what you make of them. And you and I have been very intentionally talking about what this teaches us about losing and gaining. I mean, obviously, I think for both of us, let's be really honest, it heightened our fear of losing each other. Because when you lose somebody, especially right now, when you lose somebody to coronavirus in your family, I mean, we didn't want to go out of the house right away. Like we start to get extra paranoid and scared because we don't really understand the true impact of this virus yet. And people are acting like goddamn idiots out there, not adhering to safer distancing. And, you know, it's just so it's hard sometimes because you've experienced this big loss. Then you look out at the world and people are having like pool parties like nothing ever changed.
Like the next door neighbor.
Yeah, like our next door neighbors. So if you're not listening, but stop with the parties. Seriously.
I think it's the extra layer. The extra layer of the times that we live in. Because, yes, it's not only a loss. My mom went in the hospital one day, and the next day, literally next day, my brother picks up her ashes. Right. And then my brother 5 days later. And same thing.
And it's weird because the life goes on. And, like, that's the hardest thing. We've had people on this show say the weirdest thing when they experience a death is they look out at the world and they're like, why isn't the rest of the world mourning? I just had this loss. And that's where the isolation can come from. That's where feeling alone can come from because you're experiencing such deep grief, but the rest of the world is doing what they're doing. So that's also been especially hard because we know the danger firsthand now of the virus and of being ignorant to the facts and of being... you know, and assuming that you're always going to be okay. So I think you and I have had some really deep conversations about not just protecting ourselves now, but just how we want to live our life. Like I think being reminded of exactly the essence of this show, which is like, God, it is so short and it is not promised.
Yes.
And how do we want to live a life with more meaning?
Yeah. And that's where we tap into the good life. La buena vida. We've been always preaching it.
Yeah.
Trying to live the best that we can through examples or learnings from others.
Yeah.
Or just self-learn. A good pattern or even through our therapy work, eliminating toxic patterns or traumatic patterns
That's
that
right.
affect our lives, and most importantly, reparenting ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the keys. Um, you and I, we decided not to have children.
Right.
And at the beginning, when we did it, I was self-conscious to share with my neighbor, because one day I said to him, because he always throws the ball with his son out in the street. And I go and I complimented him and I said, "Hey, you're a very good dad. You always play with your son." And he said, "Yeah, when are you gonna have yours?" And then I was feeling like, I don't know, nah. I didn't give him an answer.
Yeah.
The next time, I was thinking about that. Next time I saw him, I said, "You know what? I'm not gonna have kids, and I feel very happy about it." And then he just looked at me like,
Yeah. They're not expecting that.
"Yeah."
Yeah.
And then I started just doing it more freely and more freely.
Yeah.
That is kind of like what we're talking about, breaking patterns.
Yeah. I think for us, when we got together, and we got together a little later in our lives, we decided that we wanted to have a lot of energy to love a lot of kids, to love our family members, to love our volunteer work in Guatemala and in other places. We decided to become global parents, which we said. Remember, we said that like even on our first date. I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
Which was really crazy, because I had been thinking about it and I wasn't expecting to find a partner who would be so open to that concept. But it works for us, and that's, I think, the conversation around the good life that we've been having, which is like, what do we want? We're in this body for this period of time, and we don't know for how long.
Yeah.
So what do we want? What do we want to make? How do we want to love? And the reparenting part, though, for people who might be like curious about that, is, I think, and there's a lot of therapeutic work around it, but it is about learning to be your own parent again, like learning to give to yourself maybe some things that you didn't get from your childhood.
I see it this way. I see it on a constant conversation with little Felipe when he was 8 years old. Whenever I see something that doesn't feel good in my adult state, when somebody says to me something that I perceive and touches that little self, I go and I talk to him and I say, "Hey, that felt a little bit rough. What would we do different? Now you have me. Now I'm bigger. Now I'm stronger. Now I learned a lot more." And then I have that contact with little Felipe, and he's like, "Maybe we should do this differently."
Yeah.
And then I go ahead and I correct myself, and if I have the chance, I express myself, whether it's expressing in my feelings or saying something to a person like, "Oh, I didn't like this," or "Hey, I appreciate that," or something, a gesture.
Yeah.
But that is the reparenting part.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to describe it. And I think especially beautiful for all of us, but also for men. I hope that the men that are listening can help to reparent maybe parts of them as boys that didn't get some of the attention, the affection around emotional connection that I know, you wanted to have more of as a kid. And for me too, I mean, I've talked a lot about this on the show. I've got, complicated relationships, with a complicated relationship rather with my mom. And, I think learning how to mother myself a little bit differently, learning what it means to nurture. I wonder if during this time, like, we haven't actually talked about this, but during this time, have you had conversations with little Felipe about his sadness?
A bunch of times.
Yeah.
A bunch of times, because that confusion of why do I feel this sad?
Yeah.
When I was in my deepest, I was thinking, and now I could picture little Felipe just crying obsessively and saying, "Hey, why are you so sad? And what can I do to make you feel better?" And there was no answer, and I was just like out of sorts.
Yeah.
But then I understand that sometimes just being there next to him, just holding him tight, and just making him feel that I know that it feels so horrible,
Yeah.
but I'm never going to leave him alone.
No.
That was enough. That started making me breathe. And I could breathe deeper, and I could feel like, yeah, I have myself. I have me right here. I can still do things with my hands. I can breathe. I can wiggle my toes and my fingers in the morning, and I have somebody that loves me so much that is next to me and sleeps next to me every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest comes together. It's like a symphony. The rest comes like I have my shop at home, so I can create, and I have my dog that is sweet, and I have my cats, and it's just
well, the gratitude comes in, right? I mean, the gratitude's also been a big part of our grief, that we take stock more, I think, especially in periods of grief, of what is working, what is feeling good, what is there, because it gives you the balance away. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about honor and legacy, because I think a part of this show too is, it's about urgent living, and it's about creating a life that you love. And it's obviously about normalizing conversations around death and loss, which we're all going to feel. Of course, this season, as we've mentioned, fucking sucks and has been hard. And look at us. We chose to talk about it. I mean, I didn't know we were going to do this, truly. I think the irony of even making the space creatively for this show and then this happening in our personal lives is not lost on me spiritually either. Like, it's almost like a little practice what you preach, and you made the house and now live in it, kind of, and in a good way, in a way of like lean in, like Pema says, like bring the pain close to you. And so here we are, we're having this conversation. We are going to, and we're still working on creating a ritual of saying goodbye to your brother and your mom. We've done it in many different ways, personally, but because we weren't able to grieve publicly with your family, we're thinking about ways to honor them. I want to talk about them in an honoring way. You talked a lot about beautiful José, and let's talk about your mom and what legacy she leaves with you and out in the world. How will you remember her? How do you want people to think about her? What do you feel like she leaves behind, in addition to her beautiful kids that she had and she raised with your dad, but her as Rosario, as this woman, as this person in the world? What is a legacy she leaves? First,
I want to clarify a little bit of legacy. The word legacy is very intricate for a lot of people. My perception of it is what I've learned recently, and I think we saw something, and I'm gonna misquote, of course, but it was something about the legacy is the people you touch along the way. And how they represent your ideas and your feeling. So I know that I carry a lot of that legacy from my mom, because she was so kind. She will definitely always took care of us with her entire being. We were the cleanest kids at school. We were always well fed. We were always loved. Like, my mom was always making sure that we receive a kiss in the morning and a kiss at night before we go to bed. And also the curiosity. My mom was a natural curious person. No matter what, no matter what language, she would go and ask questions and be curious about many things.
And she shared your love of trees.
Yes.
And nature, she loved it.
It's a weird connection, because I never thought about it. I mean, I love wood. It's a natural, beautiful material that I'm able to manipulate every day. But my mom loved trees.
Yeah.
And she shared with me once, she said, anytime you feel sad, go and hug a tree. Go and hug it, but really feel it. It's going to give you energy. It's going to give you that energy that you're missing.
And she hugged trees everywhere we took her.
Oh my God, it was ridiculous.
Because she's also little.
No, remember that story when we were about to get married in Los Olivos, in Templeton. We were getting married in this house that was surrounded by a horse ranch, and there was a tree on a hill next to the house, but it was past the fence where the big stallion was running around. Oh my
God, that's right. And your mom went out
and
there.
My mom wanted so obsessively to go and hug that freaking tree. and the stallion was like half a mile away. And as soon as he saw her, he just starts charging at her.
Yeah.
She got right under the fence just in time.
I remember that
because that horse was
coming for
beautiful
her.
and enormous.
But she was little. She was like 5 feet tall.
Yeah, my mom is little.
And her arms would barely fit around a tree. But any tree we went by on vacation with her or anywhere we took her, She would want to hug a tree.
Yeah. So we have
She's
a few
sweet.
pictures of her still hugging trees, and she loved nature. One of her wildest dreams was to see the aurora borealis.
I know.
And I want to honor that for her, but
We'll go see that one
but she
day.
loved the ocean,
She
which
did.
we do.
Yeah.
Every time we are in the ocean, we feel in different state of mind.
Yeah.
We love to go on boats and things.
She's with you all the time in
Yeah.
all ways,
Yeah.
you know. I think it's important that we celebrate her as we mourn her too.
Yeah.
And she's in your sweetness for sure. She was such a sweetheart, stubborn but sweet. But what I loved about your mom too, because she didn't speak English and I didn't speak great Spanish. I don't speak great Spanish. But every time we would talk to your mom and every time I would see her, she would always say what to me in English?
She said, "I love you."
I love you.
Mm-hmm.
She would be like, I love you. And she would always ask about the kitties. She was a good kitty grandma.
Oh yeah.
And she loved you, my sweetheart. She loves you. She's with us still. I feel her and I see her in your face. And I know that she's so proud of who you are. That I think we got the blessing of both your mom and your dad being able to tell you that and for us to, for you to experience that. But as your partner, I will hold the space to hold the legacy for your family too. And let's end on Jose. What are the things that you'll take away from Jose and the legacy that he'll leave behind for you?
I think Jose, I got still to practice is and learn from him. He was fearless, and I still have my points where I used to do fearless, but not anymore. Like I used to race motorcycles. Like some of the things that unconsciously I used to feel guilty for doing a lot of things that Jose couldn't do.
Yeah.
Because I was able to go out and be out late and drive around. And there is one memory I have very, very present of Jose. And when I was like 16, I was already driving. And my dad had one of those huge cars. And I said to him, "Hey, you want to come?" And it's like, "Yeah." And then in a very empty street, I stopped the car and he goes in the driver's seat, and I said, "Okay, you can drive." And he was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." So we went for, I don't know, probably like a mile, and he was so happy, and I was just like just enjoying his face. He was lit up, and it was like, wow. And then when he went to the other side, and he just touched my shoulder, and he was like, "Thank you. That was really, really cool." So I'm never gonna forget that.
I've never heard that story before.
And he always respected me for that. And whenever we talked, and whenever he will confide in me, he always said, "I'm telling you this because I trust you. I'm telling you this because I trust you," because he didn't trust a lot of people.
Yeah.
Including my mom and my brother. He felt limited by them.
Yeah.
But Jose was brilliant, and he was a normal functional adult that was limited by a condition that was overlooked and overprotected by.
And he loved you and he looked up to you, and you are a wonderful brother. I hadn't heard that story. I've heard lots of stories about you and Jose. I'd never heard that story. It made me very emotional because I think that's a beautiful example of how you love honey, who you are in your family, and how you've seen your family for so long, and that they see you. And I know your brother admires you, and I also know that we just gained two amazing angels in our life. And it won't be easy, but we'll rough this season together. And I'm so grateful that you came on and that you felt open enough to share this. I want to be protective of you because this is also a thing in progress, like this is how we're feeling today as we're recording this on, August 6th. But we're allowed to feel all kinds of things in all kinds of ways. And so is anybody and everybody who's experiencing losses. And so this, I hope I know will be helpful for people who are listening and watching, whether they've lost a family member now or they're thinking about it in the future or they haven't addressed that loss. Talking about it, if you're lucky enough to have a partner or blessed enough to have people in your life you can share it with them, because to hold it inside can be really painful.
Very important. It's very important to let that out. However, the process anybody has going through this. I know I'm not the only one that is going through this right now in the world. But however the process looks like, just do it, because it's very important to let the feelings out.
And also, I'll get on the soapbox for us at the end, which is like, honest to God, wear a mask. It's the most basic common courtesy you can do. I don't give a shit if you believe it's a real thing or not. Just do it. We wear seatbelts. We put on shoes when we go outside. Like, it's a mask will help. But most importantly, understand and let's not make fun of or diminish the people who do believe differently, right? Because there are lots of reasons that people might believe the things they read. And we know this for a fact in this country, that they believe things that they're reading online that are not true. So it's a scary time to be in, where there's a lot of information happening. And so we want to have space and grace and compassion for that. And I do too, because I can also be very judgmental about that. And I want to say that for this program, that, there's a lot of science to lean on in this, and that we can do our part to help each other. And I'm really proud of you. I'm proud of you for coming on, and I'm grateful that you opened your heart to share that with other people today, sweetheart.
Thank you.
I love you.
I love you.
I knew when I chose to embark upon the journey to bring a show to life called We're All Gonna Die Anyway, that I would be confronted with my own personal vulnerabilities around life and death and everything in between. I was prepared, because this is the career that I've chosen and the kind of work that I do, to share my experiences publicly. And I knew that I would and be able to, by and large, be vulnerable, although not always comfortable, but it was something that I felt like I knew was part of this journey. What I couldn't have imagined is that I would be sharing so vulnerably my partner, a man that I love deeply and dearly, my husband, Felipe, who in this conversation that we just had blows me away and continues to blow me away with his thoughtfulness and his internal consideration of his own process. I mean, one of the things, just to be, while we're already vulnerable, let me just be even more vulnerable. One of the things that I knew I was attracted to and loved about Felipe was his ability to face his stuff, and a desire to want to be a better person in life and to want to understand all of his emotional levels. For a man in our culture, albeit we grew up in different cultures, but in our world, for me to meet another person and a man who was prioritizing that in his life, it was something that I was very drawn to, and I knew we would make good partnership with, because we both shared that value. And in this time right now where he has really experienced the unthinkable, I mean, losing any parent and any sibling at any time is terrible. Losing a parent and a sibling during a pandemic where you cannot go to hug them, your family, to mourn, to bury, to grieve with your people, it's deeply unthinkable. And there are so many of us experiencing that right now. So many. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing losses because of COVID that will never have a chance to have the closures that are often needed. And beyond COVID, there are lots of people who lose people all the time who don't get to have closures, who don't get to say goodbye. But this is a unique time. And I think that watching my husband grapple with now having both parents deceased, a brother very close in age deceased, and reckoning with the changing world that we're in, I think what we can take and what I would take from this conversation, what I'm so deeply proud of him for, is acknowledging all the levels, right? He isn't painting it with one brush. He is allowing himself to feel everything. He's allowing himself to feel the joy. I can bear witness to that. There are times we're having great times, even recently, where we're feeling happiness and we're letting ourselves feel joy. And then he has been deeply depressed and deeply sad. And that is the human experience. That is the grief and pain is the cost of loving something so deeply and so dearly. And so I'm watching him feel all of that, and I am feeling all of that with him and holding that space. And so I love that he's accepting all the levels of what's happening. I also watch him grapple with that shame and blame. I think when somebody dies and somebody dies tragically, we want to assert the blame and shame. It should have this box it fits in. It should all make sense. None of this makes sense. This time that we're in is crazy and uncertain and scary and all of those things. And they were just concepts to us a couple of months ago, and now they're reality. And so I'm hoping that people who are, I feel fortunate enough to see him this raw and vulnerable and to be shared with so lovingly, because I know that's why he wanted to do this program. I mean, my husband does not do this stuff in front of the camera. That is not his art. His art is making beautiful wood furniture, and he's a brilliant artist. Sharing himself like this is a big leap. And I know he does it for me because he loves me and he believes in the work that I'm creating in the world. But I know he does it for you. I know he does it because he loves people and he loves sharing parts of himself, because when he shares parts of himself, he learns about parts of himself too. And so I would take that, if you can, from this conversation today to obviously be safe, be smart, have difficult conversations if you can, when you can, with your family. But most of all, don't wait to tell him that you love him. Tell him that you love him right now, and work as hard as you can on loving yourself so that you can experience the full range of emotions that we get to feel when we get the joy and the blessing of being alive.
You've been listening to We're All Gonna Die Anyway with me, Jess Weiner. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can also watch this podcast by checking out my YouTube channel for filmed episodes, behind the scenes footage, and all other kinds of amazing video goodies. And of course, you can always visit me at jessweiner.com. We're All Gonna Die Anyway is exec produced by me and produced by Lauren Chavez Myers. Our episodes are recorded, filmed, and edited by Jeff Franklin and Adam Lippert of B Film. And our original amazing music is by Becca and Destiny Petrell. As always, I want to send a special thank you to the love of my life, the amor de mi vida, Felipe Lopez. And if you love this podcast, please make sure to tell your friends, subscribe, and leave a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, if there is something that stood out to you from today's episode, I want to hear about it. So if you want to share your own story, leave a comment, ask a question, please send me an email at podcast@jessweiner.com. I can't wait to hear from you. Bye, babies.